also the chairperson of Ekurhuleni East TVET College. I think my take will be on a TVET contribution towards the HRDC. As we all know that the post-schooling system on its own has got its own challenges. Some of the challenges are structural, and some of them probably they are related to either a legislative framework or whatever. But in direct contribution to the fourth industrial revolution, the very same TVET colleges at the current state are unable to respond to this challenge. And that's a fact. And part of that, it's structural, because type of the programs that are offered are in twofold. And the fourth industrial revolution lies on occupational skills rather than the ministerial skills. Where the industry complains about the mismatch of skills, I think it's more on a ministerial programs, because they are static. There's no way that you can be innovative towards it, and it tends to take forever in terms of responding to whatever challenges that are required at a particular period of time. But where probably we can be flexible and try to be responsive, but we have been prevented by the act itself, that's where we need to start to pay focus on, because we don't have any autonomy currently for the institution to be responsive to whatever challenges that probably as HRDC will have to look at. And the second part, the other part which I believe it's more important, the country, even though it has not declared itself publicly to say for the TVET sector, the focus is towards the dual system. I foresee that we are being forced by certain circumstances for us to be forced to look at fourth industrial revolution. Because the dual system, that's where you can be flexible on a dual system where the industry has to play its role and also the institution in terms of a curriculum development. But here's the catch. One of the catches is that in our current legislative environment within the country, industry, there are no regulations. Industry is not forced to be part of any organized business. And yet if you compare with Germany, all industries are forced to belong to a chamber. And for that chamber, you need to be part of a specific sector. In this country, business is doing as they please. Hence, once you start to develop any policy, there's always a shift of a goalpost. There will be new challenges, or probably our politicians will tell us that this policy has produced unintended consequences. And that thing is also perpetual. So that's one area where the country has to look at in terms of how do you regularize or legislate industry to say once DTI approves or gives whatever license for you to operate, this is the sector that you belong to, and this is the contribution that you need to have, except to talk about the levies. But in terms of being affiliated by force, then some of these aspects that we're talking about, then they will be easier, because that's the industry that needs to drive the TVET curriculum. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Now, before we take more, there are some, questions that have emerged from the previous session and a couple of them that are coming out now. The first question that was raised, and I think the panel can help, respond to those is, what kind of an economy, do we envisage and are we going to, work towards? In the education sector, for instance, education and training sector, in the past 2-3 years, there's been talk about the decolonization of education. And it's not something that is from the air, it's actually about what is it in form of insights that are African that we can bring into the education system. Similar to the kind of questions that have been raised about the economy. What are those aspects that can define the kind of economy that we drive? So I think that's one question. The second question was about the SLPs and how those could or could not have or can be used, to respond to the fourth industrial revolution challenges. There's now a question about the third one, it's about the lack of proactiveness or slowness in pace of government to respond, through policy or whatever means. The fourth is, I think, is a very good recommendation that we need more dialogue and in fact go to the grassroots. Let's have a groundswell of conversations and discussions about what this fourth industrial revolution is and how we respond to it. The fifth, which I think it's a cross-cutting question, from the various inputs, made, is, akin to asking what are the levers that are available which we can use to speed up or to tighten the response. Is it incentives? What is it? What could be done right across, the full value chain? So before I invite, or as I invite the panelists, to comment, I would like I've seen some representatives of the Department of Basic Education and the Department of, Higher Education, just to comment on what is being done to get the supply side respond to the demands of the fourth industrial revolution. So, as the panelists take the discussion forward, if you could prepare, and I'd like you to comment. Do you want to start, Rose?
Okay, on some of these points, I'm not going to cover all of them, but maybe let me start off with what type of economy we want. I don't think that's the right question. Because the type of economy we want is a digital economy that is circular, that looks after demand and supply side, and looks. The economy is not the question. The question is what philosophy do we want to introduce into our economy, and that really is the fundamental question we should be asking ourselves. I postulated that the philosophy of inclusiveness, of Ubuntu, of everybody looking after each other, which is very different from the American philosophy of their economy. So I think the question we have to ask ourselves is an ethical and a philosophical question first, before we then define what economy, because I think economy is an output. It really fundamentally is what philosophy do we want as a South African and an African society. And I actually think we have one. But I think that we've sold it. We've sold it to others. We have diminished it so that we can be part of the every man is an island and every person can be successful on their own, which is the American dream. Or the Chinese dream. It's a different dream. So that would be my answer for that one. I would like to understand what is our philosophy behind our economy, and I'm going to postulate social inclusive growth is an Ubuntu philosophy, economic efficiency, which is the machines replacing humans, is a first world American type of philosophy, which is not going to work for us because we do still need to create jobs. So that would be my first answer to that question, or my perspective. On the second one that was asked in terms of government pace for policy. I'm not going to spend too much time talking about that, but I do want to just once again reiterate my concern around our ability to innovate. And I do get worried about regulatory capture. I think it is important that there is policy intervention. But in fact, the economies are driven by the technology companies in Silicon Valley. If you think that it is being driven by Korea, Russia, Japan, it's not. It's driven by technology because it knows no boundaries. Boundaries are fluid when it comes to technology. So I don't want us to get to a point where we wait for policy intervention for us to act, because that means we will only react. Regulatory capture, different from state capture, by the way. Regulatory capture is what M-Pesa avoided in Kenya. M-Pesa is successful because governments took back and said, let other collaborators decide where this is going to go. Mexico had exactly the same challenge as Kenya had, but they could not make M-Pesa work. Why? Because government intervention provided too tight guardrails. So I'm just going to say that I think we need to be very, very well thought through in what we expect governments to do, because sometimes the guardrails that get provided is going to be such that we actually cannot be innovative. Just a point of caution. On the third one, and that's the last one I'm going to cover, the one on collaboration to talk. I think we've got to take collaboration a little bit further. The reason why, and I'm not saying that these companies are what we want to aspire to, because I certainly don't. But if you look at what companies like Apple and Google do, they have opened their platforms for young children to code on. And those kids are then providing little apps, and they could be in the townships. They've created an application. You can click on it, you download the application, a little bit of money goes to that development, to the developer, and to the ecosystem. We can crowdsource solutions in our country if we think in a mentality of collaboration, not collaboration just to talk, but collaboration in terms of allowing platforms where different collaborations in work can happen. So we can actually unlock what the ideas are of our young people and our older people to be able to get us innovative. So I don't want us to collaborate to talk only. I want us to collaborate so that we can be a bit more innovative. That requires government and private sector, banking sector. I would like the banking sector to open their platforms for young developers to be able to be part of that crowdsourcing of solutions, crowdsourcing of problems, even crowdsourcing of funding. Those would be the three responses for me.
George, any particular identity or economy should take?
Yeah. Look, we met with President Ramaphosa when he announced that he wants to start implementing his economic strategy. So he appointed 4 investment envoys. So it's Trevor Manuel, Jonas, I know the one guy was from Standard Bank. So there's 4 people. So what his idea is, because I can understand why he's doing that, because if you look at currently the investment to GDP ratio, a country that wants to move forward need to be at 30% of GDP. We are currently now, we were 24, and during the Zuma administration we dropped to 19%. Okay? So it pushed us back, and now we want to develop that, because investment is the most important building block to achieve higher inclusive economic growth and employment creation. Because if you're not going to invest, you're not going to be able to grow your economy. And with new investment, is an opportunity for us to bring more black people and women into the economy. You see, because we cannot now let those that already have continue to have. And so therefore we must get the PIC and other asset managers. And the biggest problem for black people is the issue of your business plan, the pre-feasibility, your feasibility, and your bankability. You see? Because we said, no, I've got an idea. But the idea can work for 50 cents. But the idea cannot work for R1 billion. You see? The other thing is this. We've met with business, and I'm not talking about BUSA and business, Black Business Council. I sometimes get confused with BBC, the TV.
Yes, yes, me too.
Now, both of us agree that we must also have a sector approach, right? Now, there's a scripture in the Bible, I don't know where it is, you know, but...
we can confirm or disconfirm, so go ahead.
I was many years ago that I've been to Sunday school, but the Lord asked this person, what do you have in your hand? And for me, that is what South Africa must also look at, is what do we have that gives us a competitive advantage over others, okay? Number one, it's very easy, we've got 2 oceans. And countries that economies develop very quickly is countries that, you know, and oceans and exports and all these things. Remember we have Pakistan, the ocean economy stuff. So those things must go beyond talking. It must go to implementation. Then the second thing is the issue about we've got minerals, right, in this country. I think we've got minerals for about another 25 trillion. But we are our biggest enemies. We fight over who the asset belongs to. The minerals belong to the government, right? So if you want to start a mine, you must apply for a license. Now everyone that's a politician wants to come with a new slogan. So you must just say, look, if a foreign investor come in, he must partner with a black person or a black group, right? But not only just one. It must be a broader, you see, so that you empower more people. Now, on the issue of beneficiation, where's my comrade?
He left.
Is he gone? Anyway, let me answer the question anyway. I agree with him that beneficiation is critical. I'll give you one example of the diamond industry. You know, we still mine enough diamonds in Africa, but we send all the diamonds to Amsterdam, and the beers mix all the diamonds together, and then we must buy it back again before we can polish and cut, okay? On the same issue in terms of the issue of the support, you see, you need to give support for your entrepreneurs, and that is what the Chinese are doing. The Chinese know they want to start a big semiconductor industry. The biggest competitor is the US. Now, whether you hook or crook or steal or whatever the technology, because the IP costs a lot of money. Remember, those people have invested in that, and you know the thing's getting smaller. So therefore, the Chinese are investing a huge amount of money to get that particular industry going, because I think that's going to be the industry of the future. On the issue of the skills and the FET colleges, look, I like the German model of the dual education system, okay? It doesn't mean if you go to and you become an artisan like a bricklayer or a carpenter or somebody that works with his hands. There's no disgrace in that, because not everybody can be like Rose, you know. She's very smart, PhD, things like that. Some of us must do the tiling, you know. Some of us must do the plumbing and get our hands dirty. But all of us contribute towards the economy.
So I want to take you on that, you know.
Thank you.
So, I mean, the conversation goes on like, you know, we kind of conversing within the understanding of your classic market economy that has been serving us for so many decades and centuries. Isn't the question that the fourth industrial revolution is actually upsetting that?
Correct.
Right? Isn't the question that, you know, the emergence of blockchain, you know, it's putting things upside down, you know, and the question is, what does it mean for labor? Shouldn't we be thinking about actually understanding exactly what the implications of the fourth industrial revolutions are to labor, South African labor in particular? All the presentations that I see about which ones are the resilient jobs internationally, but which ones are the resilient jobs nationally, within what understanding of a kind of an economy that we want to run. So I think that whole idea about the philosophy of the economy, if you land in China, they do business differently. The way they relate to you, it's very much Chinese. If you go to the US, they do business differently. So what is it that is unique to us that we should be optimally taking advantage of so that we are not left behind in this fourth industrial revolution? So Ilse?
Can I say a few things? Firstly, that's why they refer to the fourth industrial revolution as disruptive. So it's going to disrupt many things. And I think the opportunity that we have is with the fourth industrial revolution, we are reminded of what the problems that we have to address. So that's our starting point, is the problems that haven't been resolved for South Africa. And in government, that is what we are reminded of and that we have to look into. For example, with the economy, we are busy looking at the structural changes that we have to work on, and we are busy with research, what we call a deep dive research, going into specific sectors and identifying the problems that we have, problems of ownership, competition, skills, and many things. And we will formally release those reports. I think they've started releasing some of the reports referring to the think tank of trade and industry in partnership with University of Joburg. And I think that touches also on the responsiveness of government. We have decided that government need to coordinate our plans. We can't allow every department to run into a direction. So what we've done is we've called firstly the economic cluster departments together, and we discussed the issues that we are challenged with. So there were 18 departments represented. We discussed it, and we decided that there's going to be 4 leading departments. It's Department of Science and Technology, Department of Trade and Industry, Department of Telecommunications, and then Department of Higher Education. And we, in our different mandates, we are going to focus then on the fourth industrial revolution. So on the government side, I think there's a lot happening and that we are busy. I think it's just a question of that we haven't communicated that openly. We are doing a lot of planning and strategic discussions that we need to take. I'll just see the questions. And lastly then, on the collaboration, I think that I agree that we should stop talking and do something. But also what I think is important is to look at what is the fourth industrial revolution, and we need to start unpacking that and breaking it up and identifying exactly what is it that we are actually talking about. Because it's an overall reference that we are making, but we are not identifying specifics. And I think we need to go into specifics and start discussing those.
So can we define this thing like comprehensively, or can we profile what it is and look at what the implications of this animal is to the various aspects of the sector? So do we have those reps from the DBE and the DHET in like 2 minutes, just giving us a sense of how you're managing the response? I know you're blessed with a voice, doctor, so go ahead. DHET.
DHET is here.
Okay. So DHET start. Do you want basic to start?
Basic can start.
Okay. Junior partner, please go ahead.
No, no junior partner.
Chair, they spent 12 years with us and they only spent 4 years with them.
Ah.
So we are the major stakeholder, basic education.
Okay.
12 years of schooling and 3-4 years of getting a degree. But there's no junior, there's no major partner. Chair, this is a very huge subject within the education circles, and in particular the basic education sector. Like one of the speakers indicated, technologies knows or no boundaries, and it is the same in education, that it doesn't know that this is education. It has permeated every aspect of our lives, including the education itself, and it is bringing a lot of disruptions, like in any other sector, because it is disrupting how education needs to take place. Traditionally, we know a teacher is a source of knowledge, who is paid on a daily basis to transmit knowledge to a group of hungry minds who want to know. Now, with the advent of fourth industrial revolution, it changes the entire game, because knowledge does not only, or cannot only be, or will not be only accessed through one source, which is a teacher. Knowledge can be accessed anytime, anywhere, by anybody. So learners don't necessarily need to wait for a teacher to know on a subject, because they can easily Google, they can get into the cloud space and get whatever information that has been packaged and has been put there. It is disrupting how we have viewed education traditionally as a very competitive space where top learners are rewarded with marks and certificates because you have outclassed everybody else, where it was more about competition and who is the best. Whereas the new skills that are being spoken about, where the workspace, when you get out of the schooling, you get into the job market, you are not going to compete with your co-workers. It is expected of you to collaborate with them for you to be able to perform your functions. Now, this transforms the entire attitude and philosophy towards education and type of skills that we need to instill in the learners. Move away from competition and ranking learners as the top learner, and individualism, where a child would study the whole night and in the morning come and demonstrate that they can remember what they studied last night, but moving into a space where learners must actually work collaboratively, so including in virtual spaces.
So industry is saying you are producing learners that are not suitable for their... So the question is, what are you doing to respond, and what needs to be done much quicker to respond to the changes in demand?
What we are doing is that, fortunately, the type of skills that are being spoken about are already there in the curriculum. But like you said, Chair, what is on paper is not what is in practice. We may be having them in the curriculum, but though we talk about collaborative learning, that is not what we've been promoting, because we promote individualism, where a child must study, must listen to you as a teacher, and then from there demonstrate that they can remember. The ability to answer questions. Somebody put a slide here where it said we need to move away from children being able to answer questions towards children being able to ask questions. And we are in total agreement with it. So what we are doing, we are changing the curriculum, and we are introducing new subjects like coding and robotics, for instance. These are new subjects that we are putting into the curriculum, and the current subjects that we are offering We are changing the approaches towards teaching, where we are bringing play-based learning, collaborative learning, and collaborative teaching. And we are even changing assessment practices and approaches where we say teachers must be equipped to be able to work with learners in such a way that we are going to promote these skills that are already there.
So something is happening in that regard in the basic education space. Should we get from input from the, and I'll open it up.
Thank you.
I just want to make a quick comment.
1 second.
Okay. Oh, do I have a?
Yeah,
I have the
got
floor.
1 second.
Okay. Okay. I really like what you've just said, and I want to just say to everybody, anybody that was a child before, I was a child before. The rest of you haven't been children before. Trust me, it's a fun thing. Kids naturally play. Kids are naturally curious. We beat it out of them when we teach them to be parrot fashion. It's not an African thing, it's not an American thing, it is just that. Kids play. Whether they play with bricks in the sand or whether they play with Pac-Man, it doesn't matter, they play. We actually have the ingredients for our basic education system to take that raw talent and make something good of it so that we do ask more questions and solve more problems. I love it.
DHT?
Thank you, Shirley Lloyd, Department of Higher Education and Training, and I think there are other colleagues, but I'm just going to give a few thoughts and responses. And I actually want to pick up with where my colleague from Basic Education left off. We work quite collaboratively, in fact, with Basic Education in terms of certain of the things we are doing. For example, in giving input into what a curriculum could look like, etc. So there are committees, there are meetings, there are elements where we certainly work closely with them. The second thing I'd like to say, we're not higher education in the strict sense that we only deal with universities. We are post-school education and training institutions, which cover everything from your TVET colleges through to your community education and training colleges and then universities. So it's a complex space, wide and deep space. But the developments in the department are at the moment, I would say, very much focused on looking at what should these curricula look like, what should the qualifications look like, that will be able to speak to the different, and I'd like to add, layers of implementation of the fourth industrial revolution. I think there's possibly a concept out there that it means only the high tech you need to land on Mars. We recognize there are layers and levels of implementation and innovation and creativity. And I want to go back to what my colleague in basic education said. I have a grandson, for example, in grade 4. And I can see exactly what he's saying, because when they do projects, you don't even have to teach them. They Google, they find, they do. They're using technology at a basic level. They're working in groups in the class. They're speaking, they're innovating, they're creating. That is also fourth industrial revolution at a very basic level coming into the classroom. So we need to take that further in higher education.
That's for 20% of the kids in schools. That's for 20% of the schools. The other 80% doesn't do that. And the question is, how do we bridge the gap?
I agree with you. I think there's a huge need for what I believe is social justice. We have to look at equality issues. But in the CAPS curriculum, and I'm using the term because CAPS is actually that curriculum, they need to do certain things. Now, some children are very privileged and they have every kind of technology. Other children are playing and doing it in play as well. But there is the gap to be bridged. That is acknowledged.
What's higher education doing?
So higher education, in our teacher training programs, we are looking again at what needs to be done by an educator. How does an educator bridge the entire spectrum of teaching, learning, and assessment? How does an educator from the ECD, and we're also focusing very much on ECD, and I noticed that was one of the areas here. There's a whole look at the early childhood, the developmental stages, those things. So in teacher education, I just want to pick up in the things that we do as a philosophy as Africans. We have Ubuntu. we have Lekgotlas, we have Indabas, we have Batupeli principles. Those are unique things that we do, and that is where our policy developments and those things happen, because we do have Indabas and Lekgotlas and those sorts of things. I think that's quite unique. I'll finish off now. I think what we're needing to recognize, and I'm picking up with what my colleague from the TVET College said there, what he said is true. We have to recreate and reimagine what the TVET colleges can do, should do, and be doing. And I believe we have to change the narrative. I think we have to stop saying TVET colleges are places where less clever people go. And we have to start saying TVET colleges are places where people go to learn certain skills for certain jobs or places of work. And those are the institutional types. The curricula have to be quick, flexible, agile turnaround. I believe there's also a very strong rise, and we're recognizing that in the DHET, of continuing professional development. We have very strong partners, and some of our partners are there. There is Joe Samuel, CEO of SAQA. SAQA has developed wonderful digitization processes, which are fourth industrial revolution and in fact world-leading elements of that to assist and aid in mobility of people, migration of people. There's mutual recognition of qualifications, so there's a lot happening. And finally, I'd like to say we really need to acknowledge that we as South Africans are in fact doing a lot already, and there's a lot of positive work happening across the system, and so we must speak about the good things as well. Thank you, Chair.
I've noted 1, 2, 3 hands, and I'm going to come to you. But Dennis, sure. you are the only member of the HRDC that I can see here. And
the others are coming tomorrow.
Yes. So, but I just want to say to you, you know, once government departments start patting each other, you know, on their backs, like, we're collaborating, we're doing this and so on. I'm just saying one of your responsibilities is impact assessment. So you must assess the impact and evaluate whether Ubuntu is written into what gets taught in the schools, whether we're proud about it, we foreground it, we promote it. It's a very powerful thing. It's something very unique to us. So I think the challenge is, you know, taking it beyond, you know, talk. One of the observations I'm making here is that even though the fourth industrial revolution is driven by technology, its response should not and is not limited to technology. So those collaboration skills, those critical thinking and so on, not limited to technology. And in fact, there's a lot that we could be doing in now without the technological aspects of the response to the fourth industrial revolution. The second and the last, you know, observation before I open up is that, you know, the kind of traditional approach of strategy is to respond to problems. Is to look around and say, where are the opportunities to respond to today's problems? But actually, the way things are developing, because this revolution is different from the previous revolutions. This revolution is distinguished from the previous one by speed. Things happen at an alarming speed, and speed is going to just go up, you know, going forward. So there are actually people who are doing work in this space who are starting to think it's not about responding to problems that we know. It's about imagining the future and suggesting what we should be doing in order to meet the imagined future. Anyway, I just want to leave that with you. But as we move towards the end and as I take the next round of inputs, I would like us to particularly address ourselves to what is in the strategy vis-a-vis the comments that we've had, and start pointing in a more direct manner where the gaps are and how we could fast-track the implementation of this or any other actions that have to be taken by the various, you know, across the various sectors that are impacted. So I have had a hand here. I have had a hand there, Nicola, and I have another hand here, and I have a hand there, Enoch, and I have there, number 4. And I'll come to this side, Lizzie, if you could wait for now. And I see the FET colleges are coming full force. Let's start this side. So if we could keep it brief, so that we can accommodate everybody. And the panelists will be listening carefully in order to help us respond to some of the questions and inputs.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Ian Ngube. I am from HWCTA. And I just want to pose this to the panel. We currently have the SETAs, the Sector Education Training Authorities in South Africa, and there is a 1% levy, skills development levy, that runs into billions that is collected, that comes from industry. My question is, are the SETAs part of this discussion on the fourth, industrial revolution? And if they are not, what role should they be playing? I see they're exhibiting out there, but I haven't seen any representative of the SETAs on the panels here. Thank you.
Right. We've got 2 mics, don't we?
Thank you. Can I go, Godwin?
Yes, please.
Okay, thanks. Nicola Golombek again, I suppose bringing a Harambee perspective for the purpose of this conversation, but also from business. I just wanted to, I have 2 different frames on this fourth industrial revolution question, which I just want the panel to respond to. And it leads from 2 things, perhaps, Godwin, that you talked about. One is speed and real-time response. And the other is, I would just say, pragmatism and realism in relation to these questions. And then also this idea that actually when we say it's tech-caused or tech-enabled, and I don't even mean tech, because that was like 2 industrial revolutions ago. We mean AI, actually, driven and caused. The actual implications of that for the work of humans has very little to do with tech. And when we think about the triangle, in our context, and even in any context, it doesn't mean that everybody now has to be a digital professional. Okay. When India thought about its next 1 million jobs on the front page of The Economist about 3 years ago, what jobs were those? Delivery. Okay, because the impact of the fourth industrial revolution on India will be e-commerce. And what India needed was drivers for last mile logistics. Okay. And when the Philippines is responding to opportunity around the sort of the outsourcing of services that happens through tech enablement, the response is 1 million jobs in the Philippines. They're call center jobs. You don't need a university degree for them. Harambee has placed 10,000 young people in the last 2 years into call centers that have no more than a matric. And they are working for global PPOs, earning really good entry-level wages. Now, I just want to keep appealing that we need to think about this transformation in the economy in real time. We need to be imagining it as now. The future is here, guys. There is no future we're talking about. The future is here. And we have, this is 10 years is a lifetime in this revolution, right? The amount of change we've seen in the last 5 years is going to absolutely multiply. So this next 10 years really matters. And by the way, it coincides with that population boom. It coincides with our youth population bulge. So this next 10, 15 years of our NDP really matters. The future is not some other time. It really is now. Now, why does that matter about our response? Is because we must also understand who are the young people we have, not the young people we wish we had, and it's not about them. It's about their assets. It's about understanding their assets. They are an asset. A young population should be an asset. On the other hand, we also have the education system we have. We have to applaud and support and put wind in the sail of all our efforts around improving that education system. But when we look at our ANA results from before they were canned, and we look at the performance of grade 9s on mathematics, it's going to take a long time. Changing education system performance, and Godwin is himself driving this process, is a long, hard process. We can leapfrog for learners. It's still a long process. So I think I'm appealing that as we think fourth industrial revolution, we also think in a very pragmatic way about the young people we have, the care economy globally. What are the things we can be good at with who we are? And I think Rose was pointing to this as well. What are the things that we can be good at with who we are, not who someone else thinks we should be, or we wish we were, or we wish we had. So I just really want to reinforce that point.
Hello.
Enoch, if you're not pragmatic, I don't know. Please.
Yeah, and the most relevant way of being pragmatic is to ensure that we take the current cohort of teachers along. That's Enoch from basic education. So I think what we need to acknowledge is that we need a very strong change management approach in terms of how do we change the mindset of the current cohort of teachers. Because we can work, of course, with new teachers who are coming in, but of course they are a small percentage if you look at the total teacher population. So I think that's where we need to work hard as the Department of Basic Education. The second area is, of course, the issue around the environmental factors. Because clearly, whilst responding to the fourth industrial revolution doesn't only depend on the use of technology, but the use of technology still plays a critical part of that. And the issue of access to resources, access to gadgets, issues of connectivity, particularly in your rural areas where the bulk of our learners are. The issue of the theft that happens with the resources that are invested in our schools that are supposed to assist us to change. Those are some of the contextual factors that together we need to find a strategy to address, because if we don't address them, even the little investments that we do will not make a difference. Thank you.
So we had another hand this side. So as the mic is coming this way, so Nicola appeared to be saying that it will be useful to profile the kind of jobs that we as a country want to focus on. And if I were to build onto that based on Enoch's input, perhaps we need to start getting the employer talking to the supply side providers. So DBE, even private schools and universities, and say, we're prioritizing these jobs because we think we have a competitive advantage as the country to do that, taking into account, you know, what kind of maths grades we can produce, in what numbers, and so on, and prioritize those. Anyway, that's just my observation, and if any inputs in that regard, would appreciate.
Yeah, thank you. My name is Letepe Maisela. I'll be brief and generic because my day job is that of a management consultant, and I'm called upon to attend to management lack of effectiveness. I think the fourth industrial revolution is actually going to impact negatively on the effectiveness of our labor-intensive economy. And that is what we need to be looking at. But we shouldn't be forgetting that we are still reliving the third industrial revolution, which is internet-driven and all that. Almost more than 60% of people in this country are not yet even au fait with internet. So we haven't even survived the third industrial revolution, and we are looking forward into the fourth industrial revolution. But what gives me hope is that because we have gone through the first, the second, and we are going through the third. We would reach the fourth industrial revolution, but we need to have a major paradigm shift in how we look at matters of education. I think, for instance, you hear of science fiction, scares that robotics are going to take over. We forget that those robots are actually produced, they're conceived by human beings. We forget that. So going into the future, I think we need to look intensely at that robotic culture. The robots themselves are going to need to be manufactured. Who will manufacture them? Us. They need to be programmed. Who will program them? Us. They need to be managed. They need to be maintained and all that. So we can have that shift towards that. But I think we shouldn't let ourselves down by thinking that we'll be taken over by robots. Thank you.
Right. So let's move more towards like action and what should we do to close the gap. Yeah.
Okay, good afternoon. My name is Marcel Shilo. I'm from the GPAA. Mine is a question.
What does GPAA stand for?
Government Pensions Administration Agency.
Okay.
So we are the administrative wing of GEPF. My question is, it actually stems from China's interest into South Africa. And it's something that I've noted over the past few years. Excuse me. So my question is, how involved is China in the transition into the fourth industrial revolution in South Africa, and how are we as a country responding to that?
Okay. Thank you. I know Hema wants to talk. Can I take the last four? We wrap up and we go.
Okay.
Agreed? No, I'll come to you. But that's the last round, isn't it? Can I do that? And then I'll give you an opportunity to wrap up. Hema, now I'm going to count. 2 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Just to echo the sentiments of the DBE colleagues and Nicola, but I want to just remind, I want to look at the silo effects. We're listening to all that's happening here. DBE is working in a silo. I'm from the labor, human capital. That's your human capital to come in the DBE, the 12 million odd and counting that Godwin spoke of. Within the DBE, there's additional silos. The foundation phase teacher does not know, teaching numeracy, what impact it has in the senior phase and the FET phase. We need to address that. We've got new initiatives in the DBE in rolling out the three-stream model: technology, technical occupational, or vocational, and skills. It's sitting in the directorate of the special needs. And that's a small population of learners. The majority of our learners need that. So you're already marginalizing the program. The majority of the learners are not going to be wanting to take that. So that needs to be relooked. And I heard somebody earlier spoke about the league tables. I appeal to this committee to address education, that we don't need standardized tests. We need to teach our children to read, to write, to do numeracy, and to understand why they're reading, what they're reading, and how they can take things forward, as opposed to having a drama when we're releasing the NSC results of a few learners, and the majority go off on the wayside thinking they're incompetent and have nothing to do. And lastly, Godwin spoke about the child in the rural area that doesn't have. I want to remind you, there's a child in the urban area that doesn't have. The inner city schools. If you look at the townships, the former Indian and colored townships, and the expansion of the informal settlements, it's our African children that are there. They are marginalized. They are not catered for. So when we're taking out any interventions, any program to empower, please take it to these children as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to skip you because we've just spoken to you and higher education. Lizzie? Lizzie?
Okay. Yes, I have my hand up.
Go ahead, Lizzie.
Is it on? Okay. Thank you. My name is Lizzie Likulwane from Waterbeek TVET College. My input relates to the strategic objective in the strategy 2.1 that talks to artisan development. and also linked to preparing for the fourth industrial revolution in terms of what does it require, whatever we define it as. And it requires learners and students who would be competent in science, technology, and engineering. And for the students to be competent in those areas, they need mathematics. We have in a lot of our schools where mathematics is not offered because they're looking at improving their secondary schools especially. They're improving the maths results. And unless we do something about that, we may not be ready, or we may not be moving towards preparing ourselves for the fourth industrial revolution. My question is whether as a country we are in a position to take a decision to do away with maths literacy and offer only mathematics in all our schools by teaching maths through play and other technologies, and channel all our resources to produce 80% pass in mathematics. In that way, I should think we would be preparing ourselves towards the fourth industrial revolution.
Thank you,
The second one, sorry, is around the responsiveness, especially at TVET colleges. I heard Ellie speaking about a qualification that, or curriculum that was developed with collaboration. I'm just picking up on what you were raising also, Chairperson. In collaboration with industry, the qualification or curriculum was developed, presented to DHET for registration. I guess TVET colleges would be allowed to deliver that qualification. It's the model that we're looking at in order for colleges to be responsive to the labor market needs. How do we accelerate more of qualifications that are developed through that model? Because that is what will improve provision of skills for employability. Thank you.
So let's go here. Whilst the other mic is moving backwards, you go.
My name is Ray Alajari. I'm the HRDC council member. I think a lot of good input has been given at this commission, and a lot of suggestions and questions raised. But what I'm sensing is that we need to make firm recommendations, and the recommendation that I would like to make is that we need to recommend that we must establish sector-specific fourth industrial revolution projects, where all the social partners will come together, and all these questions that have been raised here, we analyze them, and we do necessary research, we look at the gaps, and we come with some, even if there are small action steps that you are going to take, that will take us forward. I think if we take that approach, we will have done something or gotten something out of this summit.
Thank you very much. At the back there, you have a mic. Give the gentleman the mic there.
My name is William Khali, coming from AIDC, but with more than 25 years of working in the education and training sector, TVET in particular, just to create a balance in whatever I'll be briefly talking about. For me, briefly and to the point, it's not more of a question, but maybe comment and also to fill up some few gaps. I'm not sure what is it that we are afraid of in terms of what we are talking about here and now and today. A question among others, one would say, how did we move from the first industrial revolution to the second, to the third, now where we are? What were the questions raised then, if we would go back and to tap briefly as to how did we entertain that transition? Because then we seem to be lock into a corner to say, what does this fourth revolution have in store for us? To a number of us, we're talking about it to be disruptive. Was research done to that effect that perhaps could assist us to whether or not we say it is destructive? Briefly, as I said to you, is that I think we need to free ourselves. Among others, is to be, as a human being would always become, is to be resistant to change. You know, complacency, we know what it breeds, and traditional approach, one of our colleagues spoke about, you know, methodology used in teaching. You know, lack of exposure perhaps is what bothers us the most, and then lack of knowledge and fear of the unknown. Comfort, you know, protectionism, job security, avoidance of new challenges, and you name it. Shall we perhaps go back and try to check as to how best can we get ourselves, you know, relax in this moving forward? And moving forward, perhaps briefly would be saying, among other inputs put by our colleagues here was, as we were saying earlier on, what do we propose moving forward? One would be, among others, to make sure, as one of our colleagues has said here, is to embark perhaps on teacher or lecturer education as to what this new animal is about. Management, officials of education, parents, community, equipment in workshops perhaps are a problem to us. You know, recruitment and selection, you know, succession planning as to who takes over. And briefly, we are living in this fourth revolution. GPS, our cars, cell phones, televisions, you know, doors we're using, biometrics we're using, you know, and then it goes on. How many trees are we killing every day? Shall we stop killing them and venture into soft technology? Thank you very much.
Even if the pace of things moving is so alarming, that's the difference. So, oh, you got the mic, you go ahead.
Thanks, Godwin. My name is Sam Zungu, Principal of TVET College, but also General Secretary of SACPO, the South African College Principal Organization. I'll be very brief. I think we're talking the issues around digital transformation, and for us, particularly in the TVET, to drive that agenda of digital transformation, which, by the way, has got nothing to do with technology. It's more than technology. Firstly, the issue of curriculum transformation for the TVETs. The second one is forging stronger partnerships with industry. I think Mr. George will recall back in 2011, the National Skills Accord that was signed, which we have not made any follow-ups in terms of forging those partnerships and ensure that industry comes on board, not just to come and paint the walls of the colleges, but also to be part and parcel of providing input on the curriculum, not to be spectators who wait on the other side to say the cake that we have baked does not have all the sufficient ingredients that we want, but to be part and parcel of providing that input in transforming the curriculum. And then thirdly, the issue of investment into the infrastructure of the TVET colleges, the embarrassment that you find that companies will come and donate an equipment that is probably 20 years old, which must be used to train the people that they want to be relevant on the technology that is 20 years in advance than what they've donated. And lastly, the investment in the training and development of our staff to embrace technology and embrace digital transformation. Thank you.
So when I grew up, we used to be told of a story of the whale. And in Shangaan, a whale is called Nkababanga head. So Nkaba is to cut. When you cut, it grows. When you cut, it grows. This discussion we're having here is as big as Nkababanga head. We can cut and cut and cut. We're not going to finish it today, right? So towards closure, listening to the inputs that we've made, very useful inputs about the gaps, the opportunities, and what we could be doing. Say, a member of the council, I think there are a set of recommendations that are like at macro level, a set of recommendations that are at meso level, And there are some also very useful recommendations that are at micro level. All of those are important. If I can give you an example, for instance, that recommendation about which are the jobs we want to focus on and prioritize, that's a macro level, recommendation. That comment about the training machinery that we have in the FET colleges and so on, it's in micro, it's in the implementation. Those are important as well, but I think we have to categorize them. And I just want to suggest, and I'll put through to the Secretariat, that these inputs be organized in that manner so that we know how we can follow those up. There's some of those that we can have a go at them, like the macro level ones. If we can have 3, 4 of those macro level ones, we go for them, and I think that will give us a traction. But I'm no expert in this subject. You sitting in front here are the experts. If you could take 2 minutes and wrap up. If you want to start, Dennis.
Yeah, look, I think some of the people made comments, and it was good comments, and you picked it up as recommendations. But I think the theme that I want to maybe just speak on briefly is the theme about investment, okay? Because it's a cross-cutting thing. And when they say, when the tide comes in, it lifts up all the boats, whether it's a small boat or whether it's a big boat. Okay? So when we want to lift up the skills in terms of investment, that is an important area to invest. Whether you're going to invest in skills in terms of the infrastructure, that investment has a very, very high return for people, you see? And therefore, the question that the person asked here in front about the CETAs and the 1% levy, I mean, that we must see that as an investment, okay? But we must make the system more efficient. I mean, I'm also a beneficiary from this system of the skills, done my master's degree, on innovation in technology, and I'm also busy doing my doctorate, So now, I mean, you can see, it's lifelong learning. We tell other people about these things, but if you don't practice it, if you don't implement it, you're going to stay where it is. On the same issue in terms of investing in companies. Investment in companies are going to give you a return on investment. But just to give you an example, if we sit with state-owned companies, right, that doesn't give us a return on the investment. SAA, they come to us, they say, give us another 5 billion. Next year, it is the same story. Okay? The same happens with the NEL, but that was something that was kind of isolated in terms of the state capture project. Okay? And we're trying to address that thing through responsible and responsive and ethical leadership. And so therefore the second thing I think is important is the issue of leadership on all levels, in government, in business, in labor, everywhere, that we need to provide leadership for this nation so that we can put this country on a winning path. I think South Africa is a fantastic group of people. We've got lots of opportunities, but I think we talk ourselves too down most of the time, instead of talking ourselves up.
Thank you very much, Josh. Yes?
Thank you very much. I also want to say something on the CETAs. Industry is contributing about 70 billion rand a year at the moment. 3.5 billion of that goes to the National Skills Fund. And I think we need to review the whole system. We worked with industry through the manufacturing circle, and they released a Map to a Million paper, which is available with recommendations. And the issue of the CETAs are included in there. Secondly, I want to talk about the speed of change. The area that we are working in terms of specialized skills, to give you an idea, the training for a master artisan takes between 4 to 5 years. And then for that artisan, even artisan and a master artisan, that artisan to gain sufficient experience on a factory floor takes about 5 to 7 years. for him or her to become a specialist. So we are talking about 9 to 12 years. And if we are 10 years behind, we are looking at 22 years if we start today. So what are we going to do to participate if that's the time that it takes to make changes? That's just something to think about. And then lastly, the partnership between government and industry. I think what is also necessary is to coordinate in government, and it also requires partnerships between government departments so that we don't work in silos. And it asks for partnerships in this context, specifically partnership between trade and industry and the education departments, higher education, and even labor and basic education. So we have to look into that.
Thank you very much.
I can't leave Dennis without getting back at him.
You mean I must stand in between now?
I have great respect for our Honorable President Ramaphosa, but I have to ask him, when you sent the lions, where were the lionesses? So we talked a lot about our young people. I also would like us to bring women into this discussion around what do we do and how can women benefit and become role models for the fourth industrial revolution and beyond, because I'm a firm believer that, that in South Africa, in some places, not all, patriarchy is institutionalized sexism. So, and we in some places are a patriarchal society. So let's just also think about women. Lionesses as much as lions, Dennis. And then my second quib at Dennis is, growth is a tide that lifts boats, but it doesn't lift all boats equally. And it doesn't lift all boats at the same time. And it doesn't lift all boats in the same way. And so my final comment is that we will find new jobs and we will find different things to do. But I don't believe that the problem of this world is really about the fourth industrial revolution. I believe the problem of this world, for all of us, is inequality. And it is economic access. And that's the problem we have to solve. Whether we have 10 industrial revolutions or 2, is economic access. And our challenge is that economic access will bite us even harder as we go forward, because it's not automatic that the fourth industrial revolution will give us equality. I think that countries that really value the notion of economic efficiency will have machines replace humans, because machines are more efficient. They don't smoke, they don't get pregnant, they don't toy, they don't sleep, they don't eat. And that's a challenge, they don't eat. So if you want to produce food, who are you producing food for if it's not for human beings that can buy the food? So let's just think about that. So I think ultimately we've got to think about economic access, and as I say, countries that are going to think about economic efficiency are, as far as I'm concerned, are going to struggle, because they're not going to address the economic access problem that kids are toying about. And kids are setting themselves alight about. But the countries, I believe, and the continents that are going to really embrace inclusive economic growth will use machines and humans together to create what I call a digital dividend. I believe that South Africa and Africa are those countries and is that continent, because we believe that I am here because of you. Because we believe in Ubuntu, I believe that that's the philosophy of inclusive economic growth, and I believe that that is the philosophy that is not our Achilles heel, and we should stop apologizing. I believe that that is our superpower.
Thank you very much. So this, I'm commenting outside, but I want to change that challenge to, is there potential in the fourth industrial revolution that we can use to address this inequality?
Absolutely.
And I think there is some, a potential. So that's one. 2 is that I think there's a very, very clear lines drawn between DTI, the 2 trade education departments, labor and business regarding some of these recommendations that we've made. So I won't disclose that one of my KPAs is to make these guys meet, and particularly on what are we educating. But it's space and it's an opportunity that we can seize. And I know Nicola is interested, Dennis is interested, so is DTI and Accenture and some of the FET colleges in the 2 departments. There are some things that we can pick up and hone in on the conversations, and I think we should do that. Lastly, our rapporteur is somebody who is known to me. I will make sure that she does not disappear, and in fact, I will work very closely with her to prepare a presentation that will take back to the Commission tomorrow, and hopefully we'll be able to capture your very, very excellent and well thought through inputs, comments, and questions. Thank you so much. I think we've had a really jolly conversation, and may I, on behalf of everybody, thank the panelists here. We're supposed to have some gifts, I don't know where is the secretariat with the gifts. Can they come now? The gifts, whilst the cameras are here. Particularly, are they coming? Okay. Please. Dennis, you're in trouble, because I'm always going to refer you as the future Dr. George. You're doing a PhD, Musa.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah. You see, inequality, only Dennis got a... Oh, is it coming? Okay.
I already had one.
Oh, okay. Great stuff. Yeah, so thank you very much. We'll see you tomorrow. And just to remember, there's the cocktail. It's at 5, isn't it? So it has started. Where is it? It's in Galleria Restaurant. So when you walk out of here, ask for Galleria Restaurant. Where's the camera? Where? Hey guys, you just forgot to thank the facilitator. What is wrong? Should we smile now? Oh, me too. Yeah, thanks for reminding me. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much. So, Dennis. Well, thank you so much. Nice meeting you. I'm sure our paths will cross. Yes, yes, yes. Therefore, how do we do this thing?
Yes, give me your
You want me to send me your notes?
Sorry, just the so that this doesn't fall. Send me the notes.
Yeah. So what we need to do is to go back through the SBC and different programs for them to put up for us.
for him, we have been using the same room for a long time. Yeah. These are the problems. We're not yeah. But it's like you are bringing a new. I was telling Suna, I said, no, I never. Remember when I told you, this is what